Hello there. Thanks for joining us again today on Dr. Teach Me to Parent. Glad you're with us, and we have a very special guest today, Joe White, who is a local pastor here in the inner city of Fresno, and we're going to get a little bit acquainted with him and his life and the church that he pastors and the programs that they provide the inner city community here in Fresno. But before starting, I just want to give you a little quote just to put this in perspective today, and this might make some real sense to you. Family happiness is homemade. And I add on that, be creative. You know, be creative in making your own home, your own family, a place of happiness and a group of people of happiness. You create your happiness, you know. It isn't something that comes to you. It isn't something that just kind of is there that you just participate in. But it's something that you create and that you develop and that you then enjoy and benefit from. So make happiness a part of your day and be creative in creating it in your own home. Anyway, Joe, nice to have you with us today, and thanks for coming in and sharing your life a little bit. Now,
so glad to be here.
You know, we've known each other for a long time, but you grew up here in the inner city of Fresno.
Yeah.
Van Ness Avenue. I see the house, and I know where you lived. What's that like living in the inner city? Most people don't live in the inner city,
right,
if you think of it, and then you grew up all your life there in the inner city. You went to school in the inner city schools.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, I'll tell you, that's not where my story began, actually. There's a chapter before the inner city chapter. I grew up in Clovis.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And my world was...
So you got a little taste
of
the
the
northern
world of the
part
suburbs.
I see.
I knew everybody on my block. The next-door neighbor had a golden retriever. I'm sure there was a Mormon family down the street. It was kind of the quintessential, picture of a suburban neighborhood. But my parents kept imagining a city which was put together. At that time, there was North Fresno and South Fresno and maybe even West Fresno. It was really one city with three cities inside of it.
That's right.
Bifurcated because of socioeconomics and race.
That's right. Oh, that was,
and a variety of different, you remember those times.
I remember,
and so my parents began to ask the question, if Jesus showed up today and he could choose a neighborhood in Fresno to live in, where would he live?
Where would he live?
And they kept reading the Bible along with kind of others who were asking that similar question. They thought, you know what? He'd probably choose the highest crime, lowest income neighborhood in the city. And for whatever time he had, he would spend his time there. Reading the Bible, that seemed to be what
that was the message
he would
that
do.
kept coming out.
Just kind of this is what they see Jesus doing in the Bible. This is probably what he would do if he moved into Fresno. So they found this little neighborhood in downtown Fresno called the Lowell neighborhood. And it was 6 blocks running north to south, divided by 1 block running east to west. 6,000 people.
Everybody knows Lowell School.
Yeah,
so
Lowell Elementary. At that time, it was very,
school.
very dysfunctional. Had 7 principals in 8 years.
Yeah, so it was a high crime area. That's right.
26 homicides a year on 6 blocks. That's 2 murders a month. You had 3 warring gangs who were battling for turf. If you remember, back in the day, Allan, Charles Wesson, who was Fresno's largest mass murderer.
That's right.
Lived right down the street.
There,
just a
yeah,
couple.
we all know that area.
Yeah. So the Lowell neighborhood
kind of drove around it.
That's right. It's a square mile that the police department at that time labeled the Devil's Triangle. And somehow, I think this is true in life, but it's also true in kind of city development. People tend to internalize their issues. They tend to internalize their pain. And the Lowell neighborhood had internalized this narrative that it was less than, that it was a horrible place, that it was ugly.
You take on your own identity.
Right, you take on your own identity.
So you become what you think
That's
it
right.
is. Yeah.
92% rental rate, 8% homeowner. Controlled mostly by slumlords. There were 4 or 5 different slumlord organizations that controlled the rental market. And there were a bunch of systemic reasons from the city that had created this neighborhood. At one time, this neighborhood, even 100 years ago, would have been one of the nicest neighborhoods in the city.
Oh, no, it was historically. That's right.
But the issue had become, because of a bunch of different issues, this neighborhood had experienced incredible devastation and neglect from the city of Fresno. And so as a neighborhood had begun to internalize this, and yet Jesus would move there. And so along with 6 other families, each family decided, what if we just bought a house on each block of the neighborhood running north to south, 6 blocks, with the sole purpose of just loving our neighbors. And so 6 families decided to do that together. And this is what became known later on as a relocation movement. You had people from other parts of the city intentionally moving into an area to seek the neighborhood.
I remember 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
That did that.
Yeah, that's right.
Said they were going to move in there, and we're just going to live. That's going to be our life. We're going to make friends, and
Yeah.
You're going to have associations with people in that neighborhood, and they did.
What became of that
Yeah.
that narrative was that all these families, my family included, realized that we actually weren't bringing anything to the neighborhood that the neighborhood didn't already have. We found neighbors on our block who had been there for 40 years, who loved the neighborhood, who were experts, but that didn't have the abilities or the wherewithal or the community to seek the neighborhood's transformation. So that launched a process of 30 years that continues today in the Lowell neighborhood.
30 years.
Yeah.
And still going on.
Still going
With
on.
people that are still living in that
That's
downtown area from a northern part of the city.
That's right.
But doing it because this is something right to do.
Well, there's three types of people in a neighborhood. There's the people that move there intentionally. We call them relocators.
Yes.
There's also people that we call remainers. They're people that have been there a long
Sure.
time that
Oh,
could have left, but they decided to stay.
No, they're just
And
gonna
there's
stay it
also
out.
people that did leave at one time, and they got educated, or they kind of got some distance from the world of pain and poverty, but they decided to return with a heart for mission.
Really?
And we found that in the Lowell neighborhood, all of a sudden, there were this community of people, relocators and remainers and returners, that we began to work with for the renewal of the Lowell neighborhood, and that work
And
continues
that group
today.
kind of worked together.
Still,
you
to
became
this day,
associated
works
with each
together.
other, friends with each
Yeah.
other, and then the community started to just associate with you.
That's right.
I gather you just made friendships and
That's right. So as a young boy, I moved when I was 7.
Yeah.
When I moved into the neighborhood, my earliest memories of development were in the world of community development and urban ministry.
Sure. So what happened to that neighborhood?
Lowell neighborhood,
even 5-10 years into this.
Yeah.
What happened? Did the school improve? Did the
Yeah.
neighborhood improve itself? Has it become less safe or
Yeah.
more safe? What was the?
I think the way to answer that question is to say that actually we could draw a straight line. Right now, we could say that the school is performing much better than it did when people originally moved in. We could say that crime looks better, housing market looks better. There's more emphasis from the city of Fresno for the redevelopment of Lowell. All those things are happening. But I would actually say that probably the real answer is that the neighbors of Lowell, the ones who live there, who are there, and who continue to work there, that their presence makes a lasting difference on 6 blocks running north to south, divided by 1 block running east to west.
Yeah.
It's loving your neighbors, which is the key to the equation.
It's incredible. But it sounds to me like then here you were a child in those early years.
Yeah.
And so you didn't perhaps really want to do this. I'm not sure. I mean, you
Well,
had to do
yeah,
it because your
I had
parents
to,
did
yeah.
it. So, I mean, you had to go along with the
Yeah.
with the parent decision. But it became you then, didn't it?
It did.
You kind of took on the.
Yeah, I think in some ways this is kind of the gift of an urban neighborhood, is that in a suburban neighborhood there are certain luxuries that can disentangle a family from one another. You could there's more opportunity
That's
to
right.
be outside of your own family unit. So you go down to the park and play with the neighbor kids. You can go across the street and play with a family across the street. There are opportunities outside the home. I think what we discovered in Lowell is that we had to kind of stick together.
Yeah.
And
Safety is
safety
for
was
reasons
part of that equation, and
just things to do.
That's right.
I mean, you had to be more creative and do things you created.
So we found that we kind of invested our lives into neighbors. Those neighbors invested their life into us. And our community became the people around us,
right?
as opposed to doing things outside of the home. We did them together with our neighbors.
That's an interesting picture.
Yeah.
Of people from, let's say, the northern part of the city, much more loose, much more external, much more non-committed to each other as a family. But in the inner city, more ingrown, more committed, more identified with each other.
At one time in my life,
self-supporting.
At one time in my life, I lived from 2005 to 2015. I lived in the wealthiest neighborhood in Canada. I lived half a block from the beach and 20 minutes from a ski hill in the nicest city in the world. And my next door neighbor was the guy who owns Lululemon, Chip Ingram. My other neighbor was the guy who owns Ferrari, like not a Ferrari, but the company Ferrari, right? So this is the world that I also lived in. And what I found is that in a neighborhood where everybody had everything, nobody needed one another.
That's right.
The difference in the Lowell neighborhood where I grew up was everybody needed
each other.
Right? And so in some ways, like the issue of a wealthy neighborhood is social isolation, but the issue of a Lowell neighborhood or an urban neighborhood are some of the external pressures of poverty and mental illness and drug abuse and a variety of other things that pressurize a poor place.
So where'd you go to school?
Well, I grew up in neighborhood schools. I ended up going to Edison High School down the street. It was part of our district, and my educational world was where my neighbors went. I was very much, we didn't kind of live two lives. We didn't live a middle income life or an upper middle income life in other parts of the city.
So you had friends at your age level, your peer level, that grew up with you.
That's right.
In that area.
I actually didn't
and I
have
many today still.
Oh, yeah. I didn't actually have many white friends until college. In college, I was able to go to Fresno Pacific because there's a man in our city, Sam Reeves.
Oh, yes.
You remember Sam Reeves?
Oh, yes.
Sam Reeves came along and he said, I think that you should go to Fresno Pacific. I said, Sam, I could never afford Fresno Pacific. That's where wealthy people go. And he said, how much does it cost? I said, well, it costs $25,000 a year. He said, I'll pay for it. And so he put $100,000 on the table and sent me to school. That was the only time in my life that I ever had, kind of an education that would be considered an quality, amazing education. My high school and junior high and elementary, much different.
And you're indebted.
Oh, 100%.
You're indebted to a man like that.
The man I am today is a result of those kinds of decisions.
But I get the sense you're also indebted to the community in which you grew up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they gave a lot to you, too.
They
didn't put it in dollars and cents necessarily.
That's right.
But they gave you experience, they gave you opportunity, they gave you wisdom.
Yeah.
Gave you opportunity to make decisions, choices, learn how to do that.
My neighbors in the Lowell neighborhood growing up were the smartest, most hardworking, and kind of savvy people that live in Fresno.
Really?
I currently live in a different neighborhood just east of downtown, and I honestly believe that you could put a migrant farm worker against any CEO in the city, and the migrant farm worker works harder, longer hours in a more difficult setting and comes home with more joy to his family than any top CEO here in Fresno today. And so if you just measured hours to hours, you'd find that the hardest working, most diligent people live in places like Lowell and Jackson.
Is that right? That's great testimony for the working man of today.
Yeah, 100%.
And in our area, I mean, we're an agricultural, community. And
I never met a gang member who wasn't just a CEO that was lost. And you realize that the guys who are out there selling drugs and they're just misplacing their gifts. They have a gift for sales. They should be working for Amazon. They should be working for eBay.
That's right.
But they're working, at
for
such
themselves,
a low level,
a little bit low level.
Yeah. I never met a car thief that couldn't be a car salesman. You realize that car thief knows everything about your car. He could probably sell them, but he's misusing his gift.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's true for a lot of us. We do what we do, and sometimes we're successful. You know, we enjoy it, but we're not doing what we really are able to do, or the full amount that we're able to do.
I think some of the pressures that people experience, like in places like Lowell, and especially with regard to the family, is that people often kind of freeze in the area of their first trauma. And so we find that young people who've experienced incredible trauma, developmentally speaking, they kind of stop.
That's right.
And if you stay a 12-year-old for the rest of your life, you're going to be 12-year-old things.
Yeah, that's right.
If you stay a 16-year-old, you're going to be doing 16-year-old things.
You freeze at the point of trauma, and emotional development, social development, intellectual development, educational development.
That's right.
Just really stops.
That's it.
And it's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I would imagine people living in an inner city have traumas upon traumas.
That's right.
I mean, I gather that's what you've seen.
Yes.
As you lived in a neighborhood like that. And you share in the trauma of other people, I gather.
And there's multiple pressures, right? Some types of trauma, especially in urban neighborhoods, are the trauma that you can't see. It's the experience of systems and structures which have developed a context where people who live in poverty are. But that's a difficult type of trauma because you don't know where it's placed. So you kind of have a rage against the man. You have a rage against the city, but you don't really know where to place that rage and why things are the way they are.
So you carried it within yourself, or you take it out.
Become cynical, right?
Become just take it on anybody.
Sure.
We call it displaced aggression.
That's it.
And
but there's also other types of trauma where, especially people of color in the neighborhood that I grew up in, I'd walk in with my friends to a convenience store, and my friends would be looked at suspiciously by security guards, but they wouldn't look at me that way. And so my black friends and my Hispanic friends and my Hmong friends growing up would experience a different level of trauma than I would.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's very visible. You can see that. You can feel that.
Paranoia almost extended to them, where you were seen as maybe somebody that they could trust.
That's right.
You were safe, if you will.
And then, of course, you have the trauma that happens in the home, right?
Yeah.
You have families that are dysfunctional and not put together, and so those are.
We're going to take a break and come back to that point. I want to ask you the question when we come back. Just what is the inner city family like? How do they function? In this kind of a context, how does this inner city work as a family and integrate and support each other and do they really achieve? Are they really successful? Do they become successful?
Sure.
So let's take a look at that when we get
Sounds
back
good.
from our break. So get a cup of coffee and rejoin us in about a minute or two. Okay?
Diane Ainsworth's books of poetry and scriptures are available at condiopress.com and as ebooks at amazon.com. Diane hopes the words in her books will convey the unconditional love Jesus has for you. Learn more at godsinspirationsblog.wordpress.com and get a copy of Diane's books today. The Green Gables Care Home is a 24-hour assisted living facility for the elderly located in Clovis, California, offering spacious private and semi-private rooms which are wheelchair approved, catering to the special person in your life who needs attention and wants to live in a loving home environment. The Green Gables Care Home has assisted living in secured homes for elderly with Alzheimer's, memory loss, and for your loved ones needing assistance with their activities of daily living. Call 559-297-9438 and visit greengablescarehome.com.
Sometimes good intentions hurt rather than help. For just $1.76 per meal, the Fresno Rescue Mission offers more than food. We offer hope. Please donate today.
Do you need a locksmith? Layman's Lock and Safe Service and Repair is available for you. 559-228-1805.
Gained a lot, learned a lot, and got a lot of love. If it weren't for the knowledge that I had gained from the classes at PCC, I probably wouldn't be the mom I am today. See, there it goes.
I would love you to meet my son, Aaron. My situation was very difficult. I didn't know how my life was going to turn out.
We graduated in June 2010 and we got married in July. And through family, the Pregnancy Care Center changed our lives.
The Pregnancy Care Center was a huge, vital part in helping me walk through that pregnancy, in educating me and loving on me during that time.
Choosing a Medicare plan can be difficult and frustrating. Susan Hatch can guide you through the Medicare maze and help find the right plan for you. Susan helps people understand the confusing and drastic changes that occur every year in Medicare. Susan will only recommend plans that will protect your assets and allow you to continue to see your personal doctor. As a 100% independent agent, Susan is not controlled by any particular insurance company to steer a person onto any one particular plan. Susan was awarded the #1 Medicare supplement agent in California. Look for Susan's Medicare question and answers every Monday in the Fresno Bee. Call Susan at 559-307-2287 and visit MedicareToday.net.
Okay, welcome back to Dr. Teach Me to Parent with Joe White as our guest today, and dealing with the inner city and the inner city family and what the inner city family is like. Again, let me refer you to my book, Dr. Teach Me to Parent, in which we're basing this program and all our programs on, and it's available on Amazon. And as a parent, grandparent, pick up a copy. It's a great book for you as a parent just to pick up some good basic parenting skills. So recommend it to you, okay? Now, Joe, before we ended our conversation, you were just beginning to kind of think about what this inner city family is like. So let me ask you the question, how would you define the inner city family? I mean, are they a close family? Are they loose? Are they committed to each other? Do they do things together? Are they all separated? How does this inner city family function?
Yeah. I think that the inner city family is as diverse as any family in
Probably
Fresno.
so. Probably so.
If you took a subset of any neighborhood in Fresno,
That's what I
north
think.
to east, south to west, you'd find, I think what you'd find in places like Lowell and Jackson, you'd find similar things. And generally speaking, though, I think there are some unique pieces of living as a family in an urban neighborhood. One is that neighbors and extended family play a larger role in the development of children. And so you find often our neighbors in Lowell, or now our neighbors in Jackson, you have multiple levels of leadership in the family that extend from grandparent to cousin to
Often live
aunt,
together.
and-
Grandparents
that's right.
live in the house, and aunts and uncles.
So
and
a larger support metric than if you lived in a suburban neighborhood. Typically, what you're doing is you're being autonomous, right? You're finding a place in the city where you can be a family and raise your kids. But that's a singular way of thinking about who the family is. My family is my kids. But I think in neighborhoods like mine, there's a larger network of families that support families. So that's number one. Number two, I think you have a kind of a higher density of, at least in urban neighborhoods, you tend to have a higher density of kind of issues related to crime and drug abuse and things like this. And so what we find in neighborhoods like Lowell or in Jackson, you have unique pressures that kids are experiencing as a regular part of life in a neighborhood. And I think those come into the home and they come out of the home. That's right. Right. There's a two-way street there that is unique, I think, in some ways. But then lastly, you have a family unit that often you have one parent or a parent that's working very, very hard, doing their best to support a family. But in some cases, you don't have, you may have grandparents and aunts and uncles a part of a kid's life or raising those kids, but in many cases, maybe you have a dysfunctional home, and that a dysfunctional home at some level is part of the equation for some of the issues that we find in places like Jackson, where I live now.
So let me ask you this then. A family in the inner city, is school important? What their kids do in school, how well they do in school, is that important to the parents? Is church or religious life important to families in the inner city, that they want their kids to be so exposed? Or are these things not necessarily valued?
I think that you'd find in a place like Jackson, where I live now. Jackson is just east of downtown, so from First to Cedar, Tulare to Kings Canyon. It's 923 homes, which represents 923 families, and about 3,300 people. I think what we
That's
find,
why you call it the neighborhood church.
That's right.
Yeah, because that's the neighborhood, huh?
That's right.
I see.
So I think what you'd find in a place like Jackson is that most families in Jackson would agree that school is an important part of the development of children. They would agree that going to school is important. They agree that things like reading and math are important.
Is it?
So the issue isn't that a family, a typical family living in an urban neighborhood doesn't believe that these things are valuable and important. In fact, Susan Howitt's, the old author, used to say, the road to hell is often paved with good intentions.
Yes, yes.
And so the intention for every family, I would imagine, at least based on our own experience of working with hundreds of neighbors in our neighborhood, is that most families agree that that school and education and all those things are an important part of the development of their children. The issue is that because for many of our families there's so much dysfunction, that the dysfunction ends up overshadowing the development of kids. And so we find, for example, at a place like the Jackson neighborhood, 71% of our neighbors don't have a high school education. Over 2/3 of our kids at Jackson Elementary don't read at the appropriate level.
And they drop out.
These are issues.
Yeah.
But it's not because parents don't care. In fact, they really do care.
They do care.
Yeah, and they really do want it to work. But there are so many external pressures pressurizing the family, it makes development difficult.
Well, interfering with and distracting.
Yeah.
But what about things like music and sports of various kinds? In the inner city, do the kids get involved in those kinds of learnings?
In many cases, things like extracurricular activities are avenues of childhood development that seem to be most successful.
They're
in the
very
lives of
good,
kids.
yeah.
We find that there are kids who work in part of our programs that we run that would love working with their hands much more than they would working in a classroom. And in some ways, like, it's all credit to PE teachers and sports teachers and people leading sports teams and people leading music programs that they're doing just as much important work and valuable work in the life of a kid in the Jackson neighborhood than a math teacher or a history teacher.
So this whole stereotype that kids in the inner city, the parents are not particularly school oriented, is not true.
No.
The parents are really eager to have their kids in school and learning.
Yep, that's right.
But there's interference. There's just distractions of all kinds.
If you're the analogy is that if you want to watch sports, but your TV's always fuzzy. You want to watch the game,
Yeah, that's right.
but you can't watch the game because the TV's fuzzy.
Yeah.
And in some ways, like, you have so many parents that want their kids to succeed and would die for that to happen. They in fact lay their life down for their kids, but there's so much interference that it makes it hard to see the development of a family forward.
So then, how do you, as a church in a neighborhood, help these families? I mean, how do you support a family as a church? I mean, you can't reach out to everybody, and not everybody is interested in even receiving support or assistance or connecting with you as a church. Is there something that pulls together the family in the inner city and the church?
Well, it's interesting.
What's the bond?
In the Jackson neighborhood, we've said, listen, our job is to look at our neighborhood like a geographical area of responsibility. So whether the issues are economic or political, spiritual, relational, familial, whatever they are, we invest ourselves into those issues, making them our own. And now hundreds of neighbors in the Jackson neighborhood experience support and well-being because neighbors are coming to the equation. The neighbors are inviting themselves into the lives of vulnerable people, acting as a support network. So this is the issue.
So a neighbor helping neighbor. I mean,
we've treated the church as a kind of catch-all for vulnerable people. And that's a mistake because it's the game of addition. It's to say that if a church is supposed to be the catch-all, the organization itself is supposed to be a catch-all for the issues of a neighborhood. You're just adding families one by one by one by one, and you're counting how many families you'll add.
That's right.
You'll never get to 923 families.
Very common.
Right?
Yeah, you won't.
It's a mistake.
Yeah.
The best way is to say, what if we as neighbors in the Jackson neighborhood made it our personal responsibility to love the neighbors that we
kind of
live around.
Outreach.
Every one of our neighbors has 8 people that lives around them. They have 3 across the street.
That's right.
They have 3 behind them. They have 1 on their left and 1 on their right. That's 8 families. What if every neighbor in our neighborhood said, I'm going to pursue the well-being of 8 families.
8 families.
I'm not going to reach everybody, but I'm going to pursue 8. We find that we can work with many more people through our neighbors than we can by doing it as a singular organization, and that's been effective to reach our neighbors.
So then on those 8, do they then at some point do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do they then start reaching out from their base?
That's the whole point. Our neighborhood, we've only been in our neighborhood for 4 years now.
4 years.
And we reach hundreds of neighbors every single week because we work through our neighbors.
So when I refer to neighborhood church, you might have, let's say, 100 people that would come, but really you're dealing with
hundreds,
200, 300, 400 or whatever it might be that you may not really see.
That's right.
But you know that they're part of your church because they're part of the people of your church.
That's right.
That's
exactly
how
right. If to use your metrics there, we have many more than 100. But let's say you had 100 people in the neighborhood. If each of them are meeting 8 neighbors,
that's 800.
That's 800 folks.
Yeah.
Our neighborhood, that's 1/3 of our neighborhood. 800 folks is 1/3 of the people who live in the Jackson neighborhood. So you're getting massive market reach because you're working through people, not for people. Here's something I'd like your listeners to consider. If you do change for people, people experience that as it's a type of slavery. They become indebted to you. And you become kind of like you become the savior. Yeah. And I'm a bad savior.
Everybody looks to you.
Yes,
that's
right.
That's right.
And so instead of doing change for people, they experience as slavery. You do change with people, and they experience as liberation because they believe that they are responsible for their own well-being.
That's right.
You said at the beginning of the show that you have to pursue your own happiness. And that's an important part psychologically for a person, to believe that I didn't receive a handout.
That's right.
But I was the champion for my own well-being.
And you can very creatively create that.
100%.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, churches create clients. Often we create an environment where our a neighborhood, especially poor neighborhoods, become like a client. You know, client comes from it's a Greek word. It means on your back and powerless, right? I'm more interested in creating citizens, which are contributors to the place of a neighborhood. Creating a citizen involves empowerment. And so instead of working as the savior for our neighbors, we're saying, what if we worked in relationship with our neighbors so that they pursued their own
well-being? Do you think that works in an inner city better than it would work in a suburb somewhere? I mean, is this kind of more part of the lifestyle and the way of thinking of inner city people?
Well, I think, I lived in the wealthiest neighborhood in Canada for 10 years. And so all the same work that we're doing now in the Jackson neighborhood, we did in Kitts Beach. But here's the difference. Because the issues are different, the pressures are different, the approach is different. So in the Jackson neighborhood, we're working through our neighbors to reach our neighbors at Kitts Beach. We're doing the same exact thing, but we're saying, listen, what if we did this together for the well-being of this place?
So it isn't unique to a particular population of people. It's a style that all people probably really do appreciate being included. That's kind of one idea. And the other one is that it kind of we solve problems together.
Yeah.
We approach problems together.
That's right.
We defend ourselves together. We protect ourselves together.
Yeah.
We move forward together. We advance together.
That's right.
I mean, it's that togetherness theme. And it's
you're
belonging. It's belonging. You know, that you're not just isolated. You belong.
If you're in a wealthy neighborhood, more than likely you're isolated from the people who live around you.
Probably so.
So as a neighbor, to say my job is to love you and to pursue your well-being, that's an aspect of belonging.
You know, the old story about the northern part of the people is that they drive up to the garage door goes open, the car goes in, garage door goes down, you never see them again.
That's right.
I mean, that's everybody's onto themselves.
Yeah.
There is no neighborliness, you know, to speak of.
Which is why loving your neighbor in a wealthy neighborhood is incredibly valuable, because it breaks social isolation and invites a community where there wouldn't have been one before.
Yeah, yeah. So this has got to be an exciting opportunity for you.
Yeah, you know, we're really involved in the life of the Jackson neighborhood, and we've seen some really good things.
Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to take a break, and I want to talk about that, because what I want you to do is tell us what does a church do to kind of change a neighborhood, so to speak, in some ways, but also just to meet the needs that are there and help people become empowered and people to help themselves.
Sure.
And then move forward into their own life and go from it. So we'll take a break. We'll come back and pick that up. So get your coffee and come on back in a minute.
When I set foot on the campus to come visit it, I was struck by how open and how welcoming the students and the professors were. Coming to Gordon was like coming home.
I think intentional community is what Jesus modeled with his disciples, and Gordon has really fostered a good place for intentional community to happen.
Gordon is a place where you can meet people from all over the world and hear their stories. I meet a lot of different people who are shaping who I am today.
Gordon seeks to graduate men and women of character and of leadership, and the world is the place where Gordon students belong.
Choosing to go to Gordon was, I think, one of the best decisions I've made in my life. I expect to be changed.
Pompe disease is a progressive, multisystemic, debilitation, and often fatal muscular disease. The United Pompe Foundation was formed to assist those affected by Pompe with the medical costs and other expenses that they may not be able to fully cover through their insurance. Visit UnitedPompe.com to learn more and to make a tax-deductible contribution to the United Pompe Foundation.
Okay, welcome back, and I'm glad that you got your coffee now, and you can join us for our next segment as we talk to Joe White, pastor of Neighborhood Church here in Fresno downtown in the Jackson area. And the church meets in the actual Jackson school, doesn't it?
Jackson Elementary.
What do you meet like at 8 o'clock in the morning at school?
No,
what do you do?
We meet at 4 p.m. in the evening.
4 p.m.
just for an hour. It's really simple.
And people come. What do you do? What takes place at 4 o'clock as compared to other things you might do?
Neighborhood church is actually three things. So we're going to start at the beginning. The neighborhood church is really all about the Jackson neighborhood. it's about saying, what would it look like if God got his way on 8 blocks by 12 blocks and 923 homes? Like,
First
what would
of all,
happen?
you said that God would live there.
Right, yeah.
Like Jesus would
He
probably
would.
live in a neighborhood
Yeah.
like that. And now you say, okay, now what would it be like if he got his way, huh?
Right. So we have the highest teen pregnancy rates in the city, for example. There are more 15-year-olds in our neighborhood than anywhere else. And so what would it look like if God got his way? What would it look like for those girls? What would it look like for 71% who don't have a high school education? What would it look like for crime statistics? What would it look like? What would happen to educational attainment at Jackson Elementary? And so we begin to imagine a neighborhood which is put together and experienced well-being on 8 blocks by 12 blocks and 923 homes. And so to kind of attack that together as a family of neighbors, we begin to say, well, I think a weekly gathering of neighbors who could find themselves missionally aligned to care for 8 blocks by 12 blocks was part of that equation. So we started a weekly gathering called Neighborhood Church on Sundays at 4 p.m. at Jackson Elementary, right in the cafeteria.
So you don't have to go to that service to be part of neighborhood church.
No, yeah.
Because you have other things.
Oh, yeah.
And other ways that people can connect and become part of a church body of people.
Yeah.
But that's a place for people to come and meet and join each other and meet each other's neighbors.
We started a small business called Neighborhood Jobs, which employs neighbors with barriers to employment. To be in our business, you have to be gang affiliated or have a criminal record and dropped out of school. If that fits you, we can hire you. And so
that's not the typical job description.
Yeah, we have a very thriving business that's doing really great. Woodworking business. We renovated.
Create some woodworking.
Well, what we did was we renovated an abandoned workshop in the neighborhood and turned it into an artisan space where kids in our neighborhood learn job transferable skills like welding and woodworking. And some of those kids kind of grew up through this program and became skilled woodworkers, and we created a business around them. They make little libraries. I don't know if you've ever seen little libraries. They're little libraries that people put outside their homes or businesses.
Yes.
You can buy them on Etsy.
That's right.
But ours are better and nicer and
I've seen them.
And more quality. And so people from all over the city buy little libraries through Neighborhood Jobs. They're very busy. There's a wait list of 6 months. And so these guys continue to work that way.
And what do they do with them? I mean, how do they?
Well, we make them and install them. Yeah, so we'll deliver them to your house, for example, if you paid for one. We deliver them. The boys will deliver and put a hole in the ground and put the library in front of your home. And then actually, each and every month, we have a deal with an organization called Reading Heart. If you order a little library through Neighborhood Jobs, Reading Heart Ministries will come once a month and deliver books, kids' books, to your house and fill your little library with books. And so
then people come by and take books. And
people take books, leave books. It's a free library for your neighborhood, for your neighbors. So that's second. And then third, we started a community development corporation, the Jackson Neighborhood CDC. And this is an organization which is responsible for redevelopment projects in our neighborhood. So, for example, a couple years ago, there are 183 lamp poles on Kirchhoff Avenue, and a group of neighbors came together and scraped them and primered them and painted them. Now, look, we painted them in the same color as the graffiti cover-up. So if they ever get tagged, graffiti cover-up comes and sprays them. It's the exact same color, so they look brand new.
Get them right there.
Yeah. And so the CDC works on a variety of different issues related to the neighborhood.
I have a friend that does this in Paris. Has a library cart.
Great.
So she goes up and down the main streets of Paris.
Amazing.
And people exchange books.
That's great.
And then she engages in conversation.
That's a great idea.
Has a great experience in meeting people and exchanging books and helping people select books to read, and becomes part of their personal growth and part of their spiritual development. And it's kind of a nice little program that she's got. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, in our context, really, it's three things. It's saying it's a weekly neighborhood church is a weekly gathering. It's a small business and a nonprofit, all working together for 8 blocks by 12 blocks and 923 homes. And the agenda is to say, what would it look like in 15 years if God got his way? And so our metrics are with regard to educational attainment and safety and crime, youth involvement, spiritual activity. We're measuring 7 things over 15 years. And we're seeing God do good things. Can I just share with you one thing that we've seen? You think, can a church make a difference in a place?
Yes.
Jackson Elementary is a Title I school, but it's filled with teachers that are loving and caring, who've decided to stay there and invest their lives in a neighborhood that's difficult. 1/3 of every kid, or 2/3 of every kid at Jackson Elementary doesn't read or write at the appropriate level. Kids are passed through grade to grade, and by the time they get to high school, they, in some cases, can't even read. And so it's a difficult situation. And yet, you have an administration and a group of teachers who are excellent and doing an excellent job. Now, what we do as volunteers in the neighborhood, we say, if we really care about our neighbors, and we know that a generation is 25 years, Science tells us the kind of generation based on human history is about 25 years. So we're working with 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds now who will be our neighborhood's leaders in 25 years. They'll be 30, or they'll be 35, or they'll be 40. What would it look like if we invested our life into a generation of kids? And so that's what we do. We work in every single class, working with the most underperforming kids. Now, we work in the areas of math and reading. Their test scores are going up.
Kind of a pull-out.
During school, during class. Their test scores are going up, and a rising tide is raising all boats. Educational attainment at Jackson Elementary in the last 3 years has risen 17%. The federal government says that 15% would be unusual and spectacular. That was their words. And they've seen 17% educational attainment increase in the last 3 years. It's fantastic.
They want you here.
Yeah.
The school.
That's right.
The school wants you here.
Yeah, and we want to be there. We admire
and apparently
them.
the neighborhood wants you here.
Yeah.
But I would imagine a neighborhood like this, as you said, it was quite diverse. There are many people in the neighborhood who don't want you here. You know, they see you as a threat. They see you as upsetting the traditions and whatever it might be, or judging them, or whatever it might be. Is there this dynamic going on?
I think what we've
you have your friends that support you, and you have your enemies that just don't.
I think because we've made the neighborhood the priority. So as a church, we've said it's actually not about us. It's not about the programs that we run. It's about ensuring that the Jackson neighborhood improves in the areas of education and crime and a variety of other things. And the neighborhood has said, thank you. And so, in fact, we haven't gotten resistance in the last 4 or 5 years.
Really haven't,
no. The only resistance, Allan, that we've gotten is actually from my tribe. It's from Christians who think we should be doing more things like evangelism, and we should be doing.
Well, we all have our
their categories.
Conceived ideas of what a church should be,
right?
What a church should do, and what it should not do, and that kind of thing. And that there's government should be doing this, the church should be doing that, and we all have these kind of ideas.
Yeah.
And you've thrown that all out.
Yeah. No, that's
you just said, let's do what works. Let's do what the community needs.
That's right.
And what these families need in the community, so the families become strong.
That's it.
And the individuals within the families become strong.
If we do our job right, our neighbors will believe that they were the champions for their own well-being. And so in some ways, the church, in that sense, is irrelevant. It's actually to say Jesus is the one that transforms people's lives, and we're simply vehicles for good news. We're vehicles for the well-being of a place.
Yeah. So people who come from a diverse background, Catholic, non-church, and so on, would find your approach to be more acceptable or easy to fit into, or not as offensive. I'm not quite sure what the word would be.
No, that's right. So our neighborhood is 98% Hispanic, about 99% Catholic.
That'd be Catholic.
And so it's quite easy to talk about Jesus. It's quite easy to be a church and talk about the things we care about. But because we've made the priority, not some rhetoric, we've made the priority, what would it look like if God got his way? Our neighbors are receptive.
Do you find people wanting a church, or do you think people want an experience, a kind of a God experience of some kind? What are people wanting in this area of religion?
Yeah, we found in our neighborhood that most folks have a relationship with Jesus. They were born in a family that honored God's name. They have a history of being a part of a church family. Typically, it's Catholic. And so the question of what's people experience with religion, it's simply a question of from the earliest age, most of our neighbors have been receptive to the person and work of Jesus. I think what's most important, though, is that they see what Jesus does, not who Jesus is. And we actually believe that Jesus does some amazing things in the life of people and in the life of a place. And I think what people's experience of neighborhood church is they see that work firsthand.
So they become more interpersonal.
Yes.
Rather than institutional.
That's it.
So it isn't just a matter of going to a building and going to a church for an hour.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of learning how to reach my neighbor.
Yeah,
and be part of my neighbor's life, and let my neighbors be part of my life.
People tend to think about church in a few different ways. They either think church is an event that you go to. They think it's a people that you kind of like to be with, or you think that it's a building or a place that you attend. I think what we discover in Scripture, if we just take this into the Bible world, is that I think the Bible teaches that the church is actually the body of Jesus. It's to say that we are the physical presence of God in the world. And so what would the physical presence of God in the world? We started our conversation by saying, if Jesus moved into Fresno, where would he move? And I think he'd probably choose the most vulnerable places with the most vulnerable people, and he spent his life working among them. And so we've decided that one of those places in Fresno is called the Jackson neighborhood, and we're the body of Christ in that neighborhood.
For that neighborhood. Are you the only one?
No,
or
so
are there many other churches and so on that are doing what you're doing, in organizations and so on?
Not in Jackson. We're the kind of a gospel-centered expression there. But there are other places in Fresno where you have churches that are adopting neighborhoods. I think this is an important thing. There are 46 neighborhoods in Fresno, and there are churches in each one of them. You could drive through any part of our city and find a little church there built without a parking lot, because the assumption is that people in that neighborhood would go to that church, and God has kind of put 400 of those locations all across this great city.
Yeah. So when you look at the family then, in your neighborhood, you got 900 little families, so to speak. What do they need? What do they need to learn, or what do they want to learn? What would be the next step that you might engage in to kind of help this family strengthen and become more committed to each other and more helpful to each other and grow and succeed as a family?
I think there are two different kind of types of needs. You could probably Google, and you're more an expert on all this work than I am, but the hierarchy list of what people need. But to kind of make it very easy, I think, for us to understand is that there are some psychological needs and there's some very practical needs. Most often, people of wealth and people that have means, they've dealt with all of the kind of physical needs, housing and food.
That's right.
Just money solves some things.
They went and bought it and got it.
Right. But that doesn't mean, though, that their psychological needs are met. The need to be happy, the need to have self-worth, the need to have a sense of purpose.
Those are often neglected, by the way.
100%.
Yeah.
And so you could be very, very well off, have your physical needs met, but still be very, very, things are not put together.
Sure.
And so in my neighborhood, we have both types of needs. So we have physical needs, which involve places like, where will my next rent check come from? And when will I get that next job? And will my relative ever get off drugs? And things like this. But we also have psychological needs. We have, am I happy? Do I have a future? Am I being well used? These are two types of needs that our neighbors experience.
One of the things that we've been concerned about in our world today, the absence of a father in the home. And we know that in the inner city, many homes exist without a father in them. And our father comes and goes, or different ones come and go. What's your word to fathers? Get home? Get back home? Or how do you reach out, and how do you become an important person in the life of a father?
Yeah.
Who may be in the home or may not be in the home.
Yeah. We've actually found in the Jackson neighborhood that, again, the intention is always to be a good father, right?
The intention
is always to be a good father. And the belief sometimes is that even though I'm not in the home, even though I'm not with the mother, I can still be involved in the life of my kid. In fact, that's what we often see. We
I always try to tell you divorce the mother, but you don't divorce the children.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what we often don't see is we don't see that kind of prototypical bad guy who doesn't care about anybody, who gets that, that's often what we see on film, and that's what we see.
That's what we think in terms of, that's our vision.
Often the case, though, at least in our experience in the Jackson neighborhood, is that we see men and women who are doing the best that they can in a very difficult situation. And even if they can't be together, they're still trying to be involved in the life of their kid. Now, that still has a consequence. So we know just early childhood development teaches us that kids need a husband and a wife, a man and a father, a father and a wife, and a mother in the context of a home. And so I think one of the things that people like us do is we kind of fill in the gaps. So you may not have a physical father in your home, but this church community becomes like a father.
Becomes like
a
support
You may
parent.
not have a mother that's involved in your life due to drugs or due to issues related to urban ministry, but the family of God becomes that fill gap. And so this is an important thing to remember. Jesus says that he takes care of orphans and widows.
That's right.
And so in some ways we have to look at us and say, well, how does he do that? Well, he does that through Christians.
Yeah, we find millions of kids being raised by grandparents.
That's right.
And I assume this is just part of your community as well.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the grandparent raising the kids.
God always provides.
And they do a good job at it.
That's right.
By way as well.
Some of the hardest working people in my neighborhood are Hispanic grandmothers.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I deeply honor grandmothers in my neighborhood because they're raising young kids often. They're raising many kids often.
Yeah.
They're usually using their pension or their security check or
They'll
their
pinch
welfare
the last
check.
penny for their
Yeah,
grandchild.
and they'll make it stretch for
That's
a long
right.
child, long way, and
That's
they'll
right.
take care. So I have a deep admiration for the way God provides the right kind of people for family units.
Are grandparents, though, doing a good job? I mean, from the ones that you've been working with, I mean, are they actually effective as parent?
Well, this is
parent
where
substitutes, if you want to call it that?
This is where I think, resources like your book and others, is that I think there's always good intention. And,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
that's typically there. But
yeah.
actually, you need tools also. So you need good intentions, but you also need tools. And I think that this is one of the things probably churches can do a better job of, is just simply teaching what does a good parenting look like.
That's right.
And giving people a picture of how to deal with things like discipline and bedtimes and what to be eating and things like this. These are all
Do you
things.
find yourself, though, even doing that within your own sermons?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to educate a little bit in terms of parenting or
Absolutely.
family life, or
Yeah.
besides teaching biblical
Yeah.
script, trying to apply that relative to family strength.
Scripture doesn't mean anything unless it means something to the actual life you're actually living.
There you are.
And so we're saying, what if our gathering was simply for that purpose? It was to say, this is an instructional time from God's Word to say, how do you actually live this stuff out in the context of raising kids, of working and dealing with a drug addiction or dealing with a family issue? Like, what does this actually mean when it's played out? And I think that's an important ethic we maintain for our Sunday gathering.
Yeah. I always get the feeling that kids growing up in a home where there is a spiritual emphasis, whatever it might be, of some kind, do better than kids growing up in a home that have the absence of that kind of unifying factor of some spirituality of some type. Would that be a fair analysis?
Yeah. I mean, one of the realities in our neighborhood, this is particular to the Jackson neighborhood, is that 99% are Catholic. So the person and work of Jesus is actually a unifying part of the family. In fact, it's some way, a sense, cultural identity of the family. But just like you can have an important book on the shelf and believe that important book speaks the truth, that doesn't necessarily mean it teaches you how to be a good parent. So it's the next step of actually actualizing some of the things that we know to be true.
That's right. You got to buy the book and read it.
And then do it.
And then actually fulfill it by day-to-day living. And but anyway, this has been good for our conversation today. I'm glad to hear about your church and what it's doing and how you think about the neighborhood and how you think about the people of the neighborhood and the families of the neighborhood and how you really just want to be part of their daily experience. Not just coming in on a Sunday.
That's right.
And kind of making some kind of a statement in an hour and going home, but actually on every single day you're part of the life of these people who live there, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's what you're doing.
That's exactly right.
So you're a different kind of a pastor.
Yeah. Some people call me a directional leader. Some people call me a community organizer. Some people call me a community developer. And some people at church call me a pastor.
Well, they're all the same.
Yeah, that's right.
In some ways.
That's right.
And just a matter of emphasis, perhaps. But I'm glad you know what you're doing, and this is the right thing to do.
Thanks, Allan.
And I have a little quote here to kind of bring us to a close. But what I want you to do at the end, I want you to comment about the quote, in terms of how this really applies to you and, and the community that you're working in itself. Here's what it says. The house is not a home unless unless it serves food. Unless it serves food, pardon me. A house is not a home unless it serves food for the soul as well as food for the belly or for the body. So comment on that, really.
Every family everywhere needs two things.
Yep.
They need their physical needs met.
Yep.
Kids need their physical needs met, but they also need their emotional needs met. And one of the things that we believe in the Jackson neighborhood to be true, and we believe this about God, is that God is the God who meets all those needs, and He works through us to do it. So consider how you're meeting the physical needs, but also the emotional and spiritual needs of the kids that are involved in your life.
Not just you in your own home, but the kids in your neighborhood.
That's it.
I mean, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Have a view beyond your home, into the neighborhood, and the kids that are there. Feed them food.
That's it.
Feed them all kinds of food.
Someone asked me the other day if I could just tell a final story in the final minutes that we have. Somebody sat down. I was sitting down with a pastor, and I told a pastor of a megachurch in the city, and I said, he's my friend, and I said to him, I got the biggest church in Fresno, right? He said, you don't have the biggest church. He said, you're in the Jackson neighborhood. It's just a neighborhood of 973 families. I said, no, that's exactly right. We have 973 families. That's 3,300 people. Whether they ever come to our stuff or not, they're part of our family. They're part of our church. And so in some ways, when you start to look at your neighborhood as a family, you become responsible for your family, and your family gets bigger.
Thank you much. Joe White, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Bye for now.
dentist who has a passion for superior aesthetics and comfort, you need Dr. Christopher Wong with Cedar North Dental. Call 559-432-4948 or visit cedarnorthdental.com.
Hey!
Try to close the club.
Tanya, come here.
At Boys and Girls Clubs, it's not just about trying new things.
Kitchen in my hometown.
It's not about learning the right steps.
4,
or making contact.
5, 6, 7, 8.
It's not about exploring the future. It's about helping them build it. It's about taking steps to greatness. About making a connection. It's about proving every kid and teen has what it takes. It's about people in our clubs who bring out the greatness in every kid who enters our doors. It's not just about being on stage. It's about walking across it. Great futures start here, and here, and here.
Sat7 is a Christian media network that uses uncensored satellite television to broadcast across the Middle East and North Africa, and is also available globally online.
CentralValleyTalk.com